Today we are doing section 3.4, graphing linear equations in standard form. So we are going to talk about horizontal and vertical lines and how to graph using intercepts. But first, let's talk about how we graphed yesterday. So our warm-up is to graph the function g of x equals -4 plus 3x. This is what we did at the very end of notes yesterday. So we need to graph this function. In order to do that, we had 3 steps. What was the first step?
Pick a number.
Sort of. We have to make a
Graph.
table. We have to make an input-output table. For this input-output table, we are picking which values?
X and Y.
Not both.
X.
We choose the
And
x
G.
values. What are we choosing for our x values? What do we want to use?
0, 1, 2.
0, 1, and 2. Works for me. We don't have to use those, but we can. If we are using those for our x values, how are we figuring out our g of x values?
Plug it in.
Plugging them in. First, we are going to take g of
0.
0. Not 3x, but
0.
3 times 0.
Wait, so on the homework check, you were supposed to do it like that? On the second one?
No. On the first one, you would have done something like this. Not on the second one. So, g of 0 equals -4 plus
0.
0.
-4.
We end up with a -4. Then what are we plugging in?
1
G 1
equals -4 plus 3.
Good. What do we get from this?
-4 plus 3.
-4 plus 3 is
Negative
-1.
-1.
2.
Then what are we doing?
2
Plugging in 2. -4 plus 3 times 2. 3 times 2 is?
6
-4 plus 6 is 2. Questions about how we filled in our table?
No.
Once we have a table, we need to graph those points. So let me, no, I'll erase it. Let me clear some space, and we're going to bring up a graph so that we can graph those points. We do need all of our quadrants. That's not working.
That's there.
Z?
Can you turn off the light?
Nope.
Please.
All right. Where is the point 0, -4?
Start from the origin.
Start from the origin.
0, 1. Go down. -4.
Go down to -4.
Yes, ma'am.
Right 1 and then down 1 would get us to 1, -1.
Right 2.
Right 2 up 2 would get us to the point 2, 2. What do we do next?
Start a line.
Put a line through it. Your line should go through your graph, not just connect the dots. It should go all the way through the coordinate plane, and it should have arrows on the ends.
Is that where it stops?
It keeps going forever. So I just put it. That's what the arrows represent, is that it keeps going. Questions about our warm-up?
No.
Okay? All right, so today, as we mentioned earlier, we are going to graph a little bit differently. So first we need to know what standard form is. The standard form of a linear equation is ax plus by equals c. where A, B, and C are real numbers and A and B are not both 0. So that should go in our notes. We need to know what standard form is.
Excuse me, Miss Mary.
The next thing we need to do is consider that if A is equal to 0, we need to solve this formula for Y. So if we were to plug in a big 0 for A, the rest of it stays the same. We are going to solve this for Y. 0 times anything is just going to be what? 0. So that just goes away, and we're left with by equals C. But if I wanted that y to be all alone, what would I have to do?
Divide by y.
Not divide by y.
Multiply by y.
We want y to stay where it is, Liam. Divide by b. So y would equal c divided by b. That would just be a number. Okay, next we're going to see what happens if b is equal to 0. So we have ax plus 0y equals to c. Again, 0 times anything is 0. So that just goes away. We're left with ax equals c. To get x alone, we would divide by a. And x would be equal to c divided by a. Again, a, b, and c just represent numbers. So that means these equations of lines are just y equals a number. And the other one is that x would equal a number. So these are still considered standard form for these equations. This slide shows us the graphs that we would get in that situation that we just talked about. So here we have y is equal to, they just used a lowercase b. It's still a number. Same thing we were looking at the last slide. So that's the point if x is 0, comma b, that it crosses your y-axis. If you have a line that is y equals a number, it's going to be a horizontal line. This needs to get in our notes. The graph of y equals b is a horizontal line. It passes through the point 0, comma b. Similarly, we can have an x equals line. If x equals a number, it's a vertical line, and it passes through the point a, comma 0. Remember here, the little a and the little b could just represent any number. We are asked to graph these two lines. If you would like to make your own graph in your notes, that's fine. If you grabbed a sheet of graph paper, that's fine. But I would write down what we are graphing. So first we're graphing the line y equals 4. Is this going to be a horizontal or vertical line? Horizontal. Y equals lines are always horizontal. So on the y-axis, because it's y equals, on the y-axis we're going to put a point at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we are going to put a straight horizontal line going through it. It should still go all the way through our graph. It should still have arrows on the ends. But that's all there is to it. We just have to know that a y equals line is going to be horizontal. Okay, then we go to our x equals line. Would an x equals line be vertical or horizontal? X equals is always vertical. This time they told us x equals -2. So on my x-axis, I go to -2. The x-axis is the one that goes side to side. And we are going to put in a vertical line that goes through that point. Again, arrows on the ends to show that it does continue on forever and ever. On 2a, y equals -2.5. Is this going to be vertical or horizontal? Horizontal. It's a y equals line again. So, where do I go to figure out where this line is? Where? In between what? Between -2 and -3 on which axis? On the y-axis, we go down in between -2 and -3. We put a point there, and then we draw our line in which way? Straight across, side to side, horizontal. With the arrows all the way through our grid. On the line x equals 5, is it going to be vertical or horizontal? A vertical line. Where is my first point going? There are 2 5s. +5 to the right, or 5 on the x-axis. And then my line through there is going to go up and down. A vertical line through that point. Questions, concerns about our vertical and horizontal lines? These should be some of the easiest graphs you ever have to make. But that means you have to remember how to make them. Dominic.
Will you also grade us on how we draw our arrows?
I want arrows to be present. So you need to make arrows.
Like this?
That's fine. There need to be arrows there for me to see. Graphing using intercepts. You need at least 2 points to graph a linear equation in 2 variables. Okay, those ones where it's just x or just y, those are the exceptions because we have specific rules for horizontal and vertical. Otherwise, we have to use at least 2 points. 2 convenient points to use are the points where the graph crosses the axes. Okay, so what needs to go in your notes for sure would be these bottom 2 statements. The x-intercept is the x-coordinate of a point where the graph crosses the x-axis. It occurs when y equals 0. The y-intercept is the y-coordinate of a point where it crosses the y-axis. It happens when x equals 0. On this, we don't necessarily need a whole lot because of that last slide. This is what we're going to do. These are going to be our processes. To find our x-intercept, we let 0 equal y. So we plug in 0 for y, we solve for x. We find the x. To find the y-intercept, then we plug in 0 for x, and then we solve for our y. So your graph is going to have a point on each axis. One on each axis, and then draw the line that goes through them. We are really finding 2 points here. So 0 goes in for y, and 0 goes in for x. So we are going to be finding 2 points. When it says to graph using intercepts, I would go ahead and set up a spot to write down your x-intercept and a spot to write down your y-intercept.
I didn't get that.
I want to know that you found both your x and y-intercepts, so I want to see them written out separately. In order to find our x-intercept, what are we plugging in where? We just looked at it on the last slide. To find the x-intercept, let what did our note say? Find the x-intercept. Let Liam? Let y equal 0. So to find my x-intercept, I am plugging what in for what? Dominic?
Can you call someone else?
Sure. What did Liam just say?
I don't know.
We're plugging 0 in for y. If we are letting y equal 0, that means 0 goes in the y position. And we figure out a number for x by plugging 0 in to y in our equation. Are we getting this down?
Get one down. Alright, I get it down, Mrs. Berry. Sorry.
How am I going to solve this? 4 times 0 is 0. 3x is equal to 12. A 0 is just going to be gone. We don't need it. And therefore we can divide both sides by 3 and get that x equals 4. So I know what my x-intercept is as a point. Next, we have to do that for our y-intercept. But this time to find our y-intercept, what are we plugging in for what? Now we plug in 0 for x. So this time I start over. 3 times 0 plus 4y equals 12. 3 times 0 is 0. It's gone. What are we left with? 4y equals 12. To get y alone, we divide by 4. Y equals 3. So we found our x-intercept and our y-intercept. Questions on how we found them?
Noble.
Now we have to plot those points. Where am I going to find the point 4, 0? Go right 4 and then stay there. We don't go up or down. How do I get to the point 0, 3? Go up 3 and stay there. There's the point 0, 3. Now I have 2 points. I can put a line to go through them. Again, all the way through our graph with arrows on the ends. Questions about example 3?
Nope.
Okay. Example 4. Again, we are finding our x-intercept, which means 0 goes in for the y, and we find our y-intercept when 0 goes in for the x. So let's start with our x-intercept. 2x minus 0 equals 4. 2x minus 0 is just
No, wait.
2x.
2x.
How do we get x alone?
Divided by 2.
X equals
2.
2.
X equals 2.
Next, we have to find our y-intercept. So this time we're plugging 0 in for x. 2 times 0 is
0. No.
0. So what are we left with? Negative y equals 4, but I don't want a negative y.
So you divide.
Divide by a negative 1. Y equals negative 4. How do I plot the point 2, 0? Write 2 and stay there. What about the point 0, negative 4? Down 4 and stay there. And then we can put a line through them. Arrows on the ends. Questions about graphing with intercepts? Make sure you set it up showing me your x-intercept point and your y-intercept point.